So the topic for today is basically a quote from the mother. All attachments are contrary to yoga. So all attachment is contrary to yoga. That's mother's right direct advice right there. So it's contrary to yoga. Any which way we define yoga, and we know Sri Aurobindo has given many different ways to understand, different definitions, different descriptions. You start reading Synthesis of Yoga, pretty much every chapter you find two or three new insights as to what truly yoga means. But what is contrary to it is all attachment. So that's the topic that we are exploring today. Before I start with few of Sri Aurobindo's words, there is a very popular story in our Indian tradition which tells us why all attachment is contrary to yoga. And that story also tells us when there has been an asakti, attachment, what has been the way out in the traditional yogic understanding, and how integral yoga gives us a little different way to understand how to work on this topic of attachments, or this problem area of attachments. So the story is from Sant Tulsidas, how attached he was with his wife. And it so happened that one time he had gone out for some work, and he comes home and he finds that his wife had been called to go to her maternal home, which was a little far away. And as he once he learns that, he says, "I cannot be the whole evening, whole night without my wife." So it was pretty late at night, and he goes to look for his wife. He travels all the way. There is a river along the way. He crosses the river. After an arduous journey, somewhere in the middle of the night, he reaches at his wife's maternal home, and he finds that all the entryways are locked. So what does he do? He knows where his wife would be sleeping, and he looks at that there is a balcony and there is a rope hanging, and he climbs. He takes the help of the rope and he climbs into his wife's room where she was sleeping, and she obviously wakes up. There's a little bit of noise, and she is obviously astonished, and she asks, "How did you get here?" And he says, "Look, I came by that rope that was hanging there." And she looks down. It was not a rope, it was a snake. But he was so carried away with the idea of being with his wife that he mistook a snake and thought it was rope and climbed with the help of that rope. And then his wife, Ratnavali, she gets a little angry and she says, "With this, body of, just little skin and flesh, you are so attached. If you had shown this kind of attachment to Rama," because he was already working in a temple singing bhajans of Rama for a few, rupees here and there. If you really had this deep attachment to Rama, who knows where you would have been today. And that is like a wake up call to Sant Tulsidas. That's what makes him Sant Tulsidas. And he gets so disgusted with himself, he leaves his family, he leaves his home, and he goes to Kashi. And then rest, as we know, is history. And we have Ramcharitmanas and Hanuman Chalisa and Vinay Patrika and so many other granths that he has given to us. There is a little bit of interesting story as to what happens to Ratnavali also, because she has a little regret that why was she so harsh to her husband, and she also ends up composing some beautiful poetry. We have a granth by her also named Ratnavali Kavya or something like that. But the point is that this story has been often told to pinpoint what attachment can be and how it can take away from our inner growth. And the path Sant Tulsidas takes is, we are talking 16th, 17th century. So the path that he chooses is the path of renunciation, the path of sannyas. At some point in time, that probably was the right thing to do. For some temperaments, that may be still needed, but there is a lot more to, from Sri Aurobindo's perspective, as to what can be the ways to work on attachments. rather than an outward renunciation like that, what may be the inner kind of renunciation that we may take up? So that's some of the points that I would like to discuss today. Again, there is a beautiful way Sri Aurobindo explains what is the paradox here. We are all looking for freedom. This is a very innate thirst in us. And yet, we also find our chains. We are in love with some kind of chains. So, he has a series of suktas or aphorisms, which he titled The Chain. And it's in volume 13 of his complete works. And this is how he starts that whole series of aphorisms. The whole world yearns after freedom, yet each creature is in love with his chains. This is the first paradox and inextricable knot of our nature. This is why we find getting rid of our attachments not an easy task, because we confuse our attachments with the idea of love. That's the problem. So we are in love with these chains. I'll expand a few more things regarding this point, but in the same series of aphorisms, he explains, taking each of these seemingly contradictory things, and he says, so for example, why that happens? Because man's nature has a curious attraction to these dualities. We are in so love with power that we are subject to weakness, because power will not come. We will not know what power is until we have experienced weakness. We are in so much enthralled, so much in love with the idea of pleasure all the time, that pain will inevitably come, because that's how the world is made up. He gives few other examples. Calm, we are looking for calm, but then we confuse calm with a state of inertia, so we want hectic, restless activity. That's how this chain keeps getting, thicker and thicker. Limitations, infinity. Actually, I've put birth and death at the end, but he starts off with that. We are so enamored with the idea of what is possible with the series of births that our soul can take. Naturally, we have to accept the necessity of death. This, he says, somehow in our outer nature, we think of it as artistry of life. This is what makes human life human. And that's fine unless until the point there is a little awakening, that is that all there is to it. Can we rise, transcend this kind of dualities? So the previous slide was just this. I just thought I'll show. I found a nice picture of, the chain, the knot that ties us with love. So um, this is what I was describing, the curious attraction that man's nature has to these dualities, and we love being in these dualities, and that's what we end up calling it as the artistry of life. This is all Sri Aurobindo's poetic expressions to explain the state of the condition in which we live most of our lives, until the point that there is an awakening, that is there more, something beyond this, right? So at one place, he gives us a very precise definition of what is attachment. We are attached to all the things that I was just reading out, the dualities and the experience that we want to have in those dualities. So what really is attachment? Attachment, he says, means that you desire or need, look at the words, desire or need or depend on a thing or a person so much that you cannot do without it or him, and are always trying to keep the thing or be with the person or somehow in touch with him. Precise scientific definition of attachment, in my understanding. So there is a desire, there is a need, there is a dependence, right? And there is this hunger to always to be around that person, if it is an attachment to a person, or if it is to an object, it is to keep the thing always near. So generally when we think of attachments, these are the three broad areas in our ordinary life. Relationships, we are attached to people in our life. we get attached to our work and how we take up work. And of course, the money, which is a big thing. But Sri Aurobindo, being Sri Aurobindo, tells us very clearly this is part of human condition, right? He's already explained it in that chain aphorism. There is no sin in an attachment. All human beings are full of attachments. No problem there. But if one wants to do yoga and reach the divine, one must give up all earthly attachments. So, as long as we want to be in the ordinary life and allow the subconscious yoga of nature to take us to the divine through the zigzag, zigzag, zigzag ways that Mother describes, that nature will take you there anyway through the series of lives, through the zigzags of life and circumstances. No problem. Enjoy the attachments and know that sometime there will be pleasure, sometime there will be pain, sometime there will be a feeling of calmness and vastness, sometime there will be a feeling of limitation or narrowness. That is part of the earthly life. But if we are conscious that we want to consciously do the yoga and reach the divine, we have to give up all earthly attachments. And then she says it is not easy to do so, even for a sadhak, but it must be attempted sincerely. And if it is sincerely attempted, then it can be done. We know this from their own examples, Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's example, and many others. Even though we also have so many letters in Letters on Yoga where Sri Aurobindo is guiding the sadhaks. Okay, we'll allow you a little bit indulgence here, but you have to come back and do this. So we know that it can be done. Certainly with their guidance, many people were able to do. So I thought what I'll do is I'll take each of these three things and then take us to a little bit deeper understanding of beyond these three, there are few more other deeper attachments that Sri Aurobindo has spoken of. So I want to take few minutes towards the end about that as well. So let's go through this one by one about relationships. One thing that Mother has really at one place speaks about, that too much passion in any kind of human relationship will eventually lead to a state of what she calls disequilibrium. So rather than always, wanting to be passionate in our relationships, let's cultivate more calm, more sobering kind of attitude towards that. Stay a little detached, but have sweet sympathies. These are her words. Have sweet sympathies without any demand. And I'll expand on this a little bit more. So then we are on a safer ground with human relationships. Then she goes a little bit deeper into this, that we also form different kinds of attachments to people. And there can be different approaches to work around that. So if there is more of a physical attraction or a physical attachment that we feel when we are in the presence of that person and we want to work on our attachments, let me just make this clear again. These are the advice given if we are on the path of yoga. If we are not, then these things may seem too strong. We can't, because some of this may sound like, okay, it will make me feel cold or look cold to the people in my life. But this advice is given to aspirants, to those who are striving to be on the path of yoga. So if there is a very strong physical attachment or a physical attraction, the simplest thing is to get away from the person's influence, because the moment we are around them, that attraction, that attachment will take over. If it is more at the level of desire, vital, lower vital particularly, the approach is to purify and control it. And then Mother gives two specific advice, and as I thought about it, it made too much sense. Avoid too close intimacy. This was in the context of ashram, two disciples. Meet with each other, but don't get too intimate in your talks, because then desire again takes over. And try not to express any such attachment, because the moment we express it, as if it sort of takes a life of its own. So if you are feeling it, try to control it, not suppress it, but try to purify it more. See which other direction you can take that strong feeling. And if it is at a little higher vital level, people close to you, on an emotional level, see if together you can channelize that bond, that attachment, that feeling of emotional connect that you have, and raise it a little notch higher. Mother is saying, turn it to the divine by confining your relations to a common seeking for divine and spiritual life. I want to just add one more thing here. For those who may not have a divine ideal or an ideal of spiritual life, it could be any high ideal. Even that, be together, turn both your attachment or your bond together towards a higher ideal. That could also, help purify or take it to a level higher than this. So different attractions, different solutions. The toughest one is the second one, the vital attachment. So these are from Sri Aurobindo's letters on yoga. So how do you work around this vital attachment? This is a mutual vital demand and dependence. First of all, that's how he defines what vital attachment is. And one time a disciple wrote that, I'm feeling very lonely and lonesome here in the ashram because I don't have any special friend. And I know some others who have that. And Sri Aurobindo's simple answer to him was, it's not necessary to have special friendships. Just have a goodwill and have good, sober relations with others. That is enough. Because when we are constantly looking for that one special friend with whom we can share our little, heart secrets, naturally that attachment begins to build. So the ideal solution, in one place Mother describes, is friendship free from desire and attachment might be the ideal solution. And just to give a little context here, of all the possible relations, human relations that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have spoken about, especially in the context of lives of those who are striving to walk the path of yoga, friendship, they said, is the safest one because it can have a warmth and there is a possibility of not clinging. Other relationships that have a certain name, and a social convention attached to it, there is greater tendency to have expectations and demands there. But friendship, there can be a lot more frankness and a lot more openness. But in this case, she's telling us a little bit more there that we should cultivate a friendship which has no room for desire or attachment. But the problem is to even have that, it requires, she says, a perfect mastery over oneself and an unshakable discipline of the vital and the body. One of the disciplines is right here, not to express too much attachment. Stay a little quiet. Know that yes, there is this building up, but I I need to control it. And by avoiding, spend time. Don't totally give, don't give up friendship, but avoid too close a tendency. This takes discipline of the vital. So another beautiful definition Sri Aurobindo gives, and this is in Synthesis of Yoga. What is attachment? Especially in the context of human love, human relationships. Attachment is egoism in love. And the rest of the sentence is not love itself. So we confuse love with attachments all the time. And Mother has given some very specific guidance on how we can work on this attachments that is egoism in love in the context of human love and human relations for those who are striving to walk the path of yoga. I keep saying this because, as I said, sometimes it can come across as a little cold if we don't remember this. So, for example, she's saying the first one is okay, to be constantly vigilant and not to allow the vital attractiveness to rule one's actions. So, whatever we need to do with others, the nature of time we want to spend with others, do it, but stay constantly vigilant. The second one, this is very important. This is an exact quote from her. Remembrance is a dangerous ally of attachment. And that's why when I found this picture, I thought it's really telling. So many times we find people, or we ourselves end up remembering what great time we had with this friend or that friend or this person in our life or that relationship in our life. That adds to the attachment. The person may or may not be physically present, but the bond, the the cage, the chain of that bond will constantly be there in our vital. So remembrance can be a dangerous ally of attachment. So too many, I mean, we live in a time where we are clicking photos all the time. But I personally had a little experience of this when I moved from US to India, and we had lived there for about 15 years. And we had, I don't even remember how many. Those were the times pre-cell phone. So every photograph was printed, like this gentleman is going through the album. We had so many albums of every place that we had visited, so many photographs, but there was no way we could bring all that, right? So this is something we decided to, like, have a little yagna of tearing and burning all the photographs, and kept only a few which will come in a little plastic box that we are going to bring. But really, it was such a freeing exercise that, yeah, the memories are there. If we need to really relive them, or whatever the essence of that experience of our travel had to go in, that's fine. But we don't need these, actual things to go over again and again, because those times are not going to come back. So that was just a personal experience that I had of burning or destroying the photographs. Um, the third thing she says, focus more on your inner development rather than rushing to help others. This again comes from this vital's need to be able to of use to others, which actually ends up turning into a different kind of an attachment of that I helped you, and we develop a certain friendship or something like that. So always focus first on inner development. The next advice is quite strong. Take advantage of the circumstances. This she said in the context of disciples' difficult family situation. Something had happened, a death or something more serious, like a breakup or something like that. And the disciple had written to the mother, how do I deal with this difficult situation? She said, take advantage of the circumstances and get rid of some of your attachments if you really want to progress inwardly on the path of the yoga. So sometimes life gives us circumstances to get rid of our attachments. It's our choice. We can cry and feel, stay in that experience of pain, or we take it as a gift or some sort of like a, wake up call from the divine that this is your moment to work on your attachments. And then again, something very strong, looking at more from an ordinary life's perspective. One who wishes to be a child of God must have neither family nor country. It sounds strong, but again, if we just reflect on it a little bit deeply, I am quite certain it has been the experience of many people who have turned to Sri Aurobindo and the mother or any other guru, that over a period of time, our ordinary bonds that we have with our friends and family members, they tend to change in their nature. And we find spending more or wanting to spend more time with other people who have also turned to the same path, more of that like-minded or like-hearted, or from a spiritual quest perspective, more of a similar turn in nature. So naturally, slowly, the bonds of family, even the bonds of country, begin to lose their impact when we turn more and more in our aspiration to be the child of God or child of the mother, however we want to put it. So it may sound harsh, but it has been the experience of several people that I have known in my life and my own experience. So, it's like the soul's family takes more importance, the soul based family rather than the family of love or family of marriage or anything like that. Um, so, this is where I'm going to stop about human relations, and maybe towards the end we can come back to it again. Now, the second thing, attachment to work. There is so much Mother and Sri Aurobindo have said on the idea of work. So I thought best is to just have a little checklist and take maybe 5 minutes or so and see if any of you have any um, insights to share. So I'm just going to quickly read through the questions and then stop sharing for a few minutes and invite you all to maybe share on any of these points. First one, how do we know how attached we are to work? So, first thing is it's a given we are attached to our work. We can't deny that. But how do we work around that attachments? So, first thing is, am I ready to do any work that is needed? Not only the work I prefer. So, the first kind of attachment is preference. I'll do that work which I prefer, which I am most suited to. Second, can I put in my best capacity, zeal, hard work into the work, but not my personal ambitions, vanity, passions? Third, and I've just put in a quote, but we can turn it into a question. The perfection of the work done is much more important than its bulk or the bigness of its scope. Can I work do the work as perfectly, even though it is the tiniest part of the larger project that is happening around me? Can I still do it with as much perfection that is needed? Of course, it's a big work. Naturally, more perfection is going to be expected of me. So, again, it's connected to the first one. Can I put in my best capacity and do the work as perfectly, regardless of how small piece it may be of the larger vision? Next, when there is some work to do, the less one speaks of it, the better it is. How much do we speak about or pre announce the great work that I am doing, and how quiet I can be and just focus inwardly on the work that is to be done? That also helps us, take sort of work on our ownership. We tend to walk away a little bit from the ownership of the work the less we talk about it. Then, as the mother's key advice, remember and offer. Whatever you do, inwardly or outwardly, offer everything. How frequently do we remember to do this? Remember and offer. And the final question, what if this work that I'm doing at the moment, is taken away from me? How would I respond to that? So, these I thought could be a good checklist for us to know where we are on our attachment to work and how we can work around that. So, if any of you please have any insight to share at this point, I would really love to hear it. We'll just take 5 minutes and then, so please share. How attached are we to our work? You can take any of those points.
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you, Beludi.
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent, curation of mother's messages there, because I think, despite working for so many years, you still feel like you're at the starting stage in all of them. You try, but it feels like there's a lot to be done. But just, I think, sometimes the awareness that you need to do this, offer it, it comes, but it should come more.
Hmm.
And I think maybe, uh, yeah, that comes from probably a discipline and practice also. So this is very, very useful. Almost, like how we have ideal child, and
Hmm.
there's list of them, right? What you should do for
Yes.
the work of a student.
Yes.
So it's very useful, actually. Thank you.
Yes.
Biludi, I just want to highlight in corporate world, these guys have many crash courses and many things related around SWOT analysis, and you have to analyze your strength and weaknesses and opportunities and strength and this and that. Market research is one team, decisions. So, I mean, how can we not be attached to the analysis at least? That unless I know that, okay, this is my weakness and this is my strength, how can I proceed? So, I mean,
Yeah.
how can we bridge to these spiritual ideas?
Yes, yes. So you're absolutely right. So we see, but there are also anecdotes that we hear from ashram accounts and accounts of the disciples that a professor joined the ashram and mother put him in ashram dining room washing dishes or serving
Hmm.
lemons to
Yeah, yeah.
the at lunchtime. um, is it an Nirodha doctor working in carpentry, Rishabh Chandji spraying wood, all kinds of things.
Hmm.
But then mother could see that this will be good for this person's soul progress. Because what is the core of attachment? Why do we form attachments? That's the second part that I was planning to go into. It is this thing called egoism. So that is the ultimate knot, which
Hmm.
actually is the reason why we have these attachments. So, egoism that I have this strength. Arjun had that egoism of Kshatriya. So, the very first thing that we read in Bhagavad Gita is take me to the battlefield, the middle of the battlefield. I want to see who all are there. That's Sri Aurobindo writes
Hmm.
in one chapter in Synthesis of Yoga. This is the egoism of the strength, egoism of Kshatriya. And the very next minute, it's the reverse egoism that takes up, which is the egoism of weakness. Oh my gosh, these are my brothers and my cousins and my uncle. I cannot kill them. I cannot do this battle. So the basis is that egoism. I am a professor, I am so and so. I can only do this kind of work. That's where the preference comes in. That's where the specialization comes in. And corporates and all other organizations feed on this because it is for their interest and it keeps building our ego. But when we are
Hmm.
consciously striving to be on the path of sadhana, that knot has to be unknotted. That's why mother could see that. Now, in our case, I mean, we don't have the physical presence of mother, but maybe whatever comes across, whatever life gives us, if we can see it that this may be mother's way of teaching me with full faith, regardless of who is assigning us the work.
Hmm. Hmm.
If
Hmm.
we can do that, it's good for our soul's progress. Not easy always, because we say, okay, what does he know of my strength, the person who's assigning me the work? But maybe it's through him, life is doing that, right? So we have to work around these situations. But that's a very, very good question. It's too much specialization that actually builds
Okay.
up certain kinds of ego. As long as we are living the ordinary life, no problem. But it's when we try to walk the path of yoga. That's why it becomes contrary to yoga. In ordinary life, it's not a contrary to ordinary
Mhm.
life. It is just painful at times. That's all. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is basically, are there any bad attachments?
Mm.
Are there, supposing I'm attached to doing seva or I'm attached to doing good, is that bad?
Mm. What if this work is taken away from you? Yes, right. That's the answer, as has been pointed out here. It's that last thing. What if this work, in the context of Ashok's question, the work that I am doing as part of seva or my offering to the mother, if it is taken away, how do I feel about that?
Mhm.
There again, that knot of egoism will come in. I hope some of these things will be clear as we go a little bit further along, because as the moment we speak of attachment to work, we cannot not bring in the Karma Yoga teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So this is again just a very short summary of insights that we get, because there the idea of work as offering or work as yagna, work as sacrifice, is really built upon by Sri Krishna quite a bit. And certainly in Sri Aurobindo's writings, in essays on the Gita, expand on that so beautifully. So again, I've just given a very short summary. Simple things, put very simply, the very complex points put very simply. What Gita tells us: act with non-attachment, no clinging to the fruit of the works, no attachment to inaction, which was the original dilemma of Arjun, act or not act, or the nature of action. So even if it is big, small, the ghor karma that Arjun is being asked to do, or any other work, seva, no attachment to the nature of the action. That is right there. Work with no sense of doership. It's a little bit more higher, that I am doing the work. How am I not the doer? But to know who is behind it. Gita goes in great detail on that. Strive to be an impersonal worker. Impersonal worker, very briefly put, which is connected to the idea of having no sense of doership, but it's not about being a disinterested worker. It is more about that there is some other force that is working through me. I am being used as an instrument, and how I can see my work as a means to refine my outer instrumentation of my body, vital, and mind. So with this work takes on a different motive. Fruit is not the motive, reward is not the motive. What is the other motive of the work? And Sri Krishna's advice to Arjun: remember me and fight. If you can still not do it, remember me and fight, which is similar to what Mother has said all the time: remember and offer. And act towards God and be free of any bondage of the karma. Because each karma, each action done with the knot of ego brings its consequences. We can only be free of the consequences when we constantly keep working towards God, which is the yagna, that all work is a sacrifice to the God. Gita goes a little bit more deeper than that. Gita brings on the idea of abandoning attachments. Fixed in yoga, fixed in union with the divine. Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya. Sangam is attachment. Sangam tyaktva, having abandoned, having done the tyag of all the attachments and being united in God. So right there is a condition. We cannot do true karma yoga if we are not in yoga with the divine, if we have not abandoned all kinds of attachments, which I just read out few in the previous slide, and having a total sense of equanimity towards failure or success of the work. This is samatvam that Gita wants us to rise to. And Sri Aurobindo is very clear, this is not easy to do, but if this is not the solution, then there is no solution, as he would say it at so many places, that this is what true karma yoga is. This is in the context of attachment to work. But if we reflect on this, the same thing applies to attachment towards human relationships as well. How do we practice complete equanimity, equality towards the ups and downs of the human relationships, which are inevitable, in our human love? So again, Sri Aurobindo says, equality is the test for the aspirant. Equality is the sign of the yogin and also the test for the aspirant. How much we can attain, how much equanimity we can attain, on that depends on inner progress. So I've taken just 2-3 things here. Again, in the interest of the time, just pointing out things. What is equality? A quiet and unmoved mind and vital. No disturbance. I found this definition very beautiful. Equality is the nodus of the free spirit's free relations with the world. Whether it is relationship with the work or at the workplace, with colleagues, with human relationships in our personal life, or even with money, when we are free inwardly, when we are not attached to anything. Today I have money, tomorrow I may not have money. Today I have this very high prestigious title, tomorrow it will go away. Today my work is bearing such great, I started a startup and it's doing great. Tomorrow it may not work. How can I stay equanimous with all that? Then our spirit is free. By his equality, Sri Aurobindo says, the Karma Yogin knows that in the middle of his action, he is free. This is the key. Without that, we are always bound by the work and how we relate to the work. But Bhagavad Gita and Sri Aurobindo also in his writings elsewhere, for example, in Synthesis of Yoga and in several letters on yoga, he constantly tells you the difference between tamasic, or what he also says passive equality, and active or more positive equality. So basically, that is the true equality, which is active equality. That is why it's not easy to do, because it requires certain things. It requires us to have this vast knowledge, not just external mental knowledge, but an experiential knowledge of oneness, of unity. It requires us to see in all things divine. The experience that, for example, Sri Aurobindo had in Alipur prison. It requires one to see all things as oneself and to see all things in God and God in all things. That's why he could see, Krishna in the dreaded murderer in the prison. So without that, he knew that independence of India is a done deal because he had that experience of that active equality. And that's why he was not concerned whether I am doing or not doing. He gives a speech about that. It was we thought that we were working towards that. He gave examples when Bipin Chandra Bal was taken away, when I was taken away, that none of us were actually doing the work. It was Sri Krishna's work, who himself was doing the work. And he will continue to do this because that's the assurance that he had received as a result of this experience. So I just have 2-3 points on how do we work on attachments around the money. Have an attitude of trusteeship, not the attitude of possessor of the money. So Sri Aurobindo is very clear. Don't have an ascetic shrinking that I don't need money. I am not going to, I'm going to live in, there's a beautiful chapter in Synthesis of Yoga called Renunciation. And there he says, so many times people put on the garb of a sannyasin that I don't need material comforts. And we do that because that's what society or the convention wants us to do, especially if we are on the path of yoga. But that's not the right attitude. Neither turn your face with an ascetic shrinking from either the power of the money or the objects. Money brings comforts, enjoy it, but with a state of inner equanimity. Nor cherish a rajasic attachment. If tomorrow these comforts are gone, you stay equanimous. That is one attitude towards the money. The mother talks about why we get attached to it's the vital that gets attached to money power, and it comes from collective conviction in the invincible power of money. This is where the idea of satsang plays very big role. The people that we hang out with, there is such a power in collective suggestion. If all they talk about is, oh, this is a good saving scheme, this invest here, there, the invincible power of money, that collective suggestion makes us feel more and more attracted and attached to the power of money. This is why, we say, if you don't really need to buy anything, don't go to a mall, because you will end up buying something unnecessarily, because there is so much collective suggestion of that greed, desire, that vibration is there. And finally, let's understand what is the true role of money. Money, Mother said, is meant to make the earth ready for the advent of new world, new creation. So yes, acquire money, but let it be spent for good works, for divine's works. So this is where the things become a little bit more metaphysical and also very important for us to understand, especially on the path of integral yoga. All these, what we were discussing, are the manifestations of this big attachment that we have. Attachment to life in the world, right? Whether it is relationships, wealth, work, whatever it is, it's about life the way we want to live in the world. And the approach, because that is contrary to beyond the yoga, going back to Sant Tulsidas ji's story, the solution was to go away from the life in the world, right? So he becomes a sannyasi. But in integral yoga, that is not the path that Sri Aurobindo speak of. So we should have, he says, no attachment to life in the world, also no attachment to escape from the world. This is easier, obviously easier said than done, but how do you not be attached to life in the world? That's what some of these things we were discussing. But what is the real reason why those attachments happen? That's where, these 2-3 points that he brings up, which he speaks of, that these are the 3 knots that keep us tied down to our lower nature. So both Bhagavad Gita and many other traditions, including Sri Aurobindo's own discussions in Synthesis of Yoga, constantly remind us of the double nature that we all have in us. A lower Prakriti, a lower nature, the Trigunas that work in us, and a higher divine nature, which often is, most of the time, is veiled by the other attachments, the cravings, the attachments that are there of the senses and the heart. So I think the first point we have more or less covered. I want to spend a little bit time on the last 2 points. Attachment, or the knot that is of self-will in thought and mind. That what Sri Aurobindo defines is that's the egoism in the mind. How do we work around that? And the last thing is, even that egoism is there because egoism is at the center, very core of our consciousness. Ego is an instrument that nature has built up to help us develop an individual identity, and it serves a purpose. The problem happens when it has served its purpose, that's when it starts becoming a bar. And that's why these knots getting tighter and tighter. So let's look at the second and the third point a little bit. What is the self-will in thought and action? These are the things he's suggesting us we should be working on. Giving up attachment to mind's preferences and formations of thought. Those of us who feel that we are more, mental creatures or drawn more to, the question was if we are attached to Sri Aurobindo more, right? If some of us who feel more drawn to him from an intellect perspective, because, and I keep saying this, and Chitra would be, a testimony to that, how wonderful he writes. And we've had many discussions around that, how poetic, and, it's such a joy, delight for the mind. It is very much so, but that is also a formation of the thought, right? How do we give up that? Do not remain bound to any intellectual thought system or religious dogma. Then I could not summarize this part because I had to just, since I am attached to his writings, so I had to use his words. Flee also beyond the snare of the thinker, the snare of the theologian and the church builder, the meshes of the word and bondage of the idea. Bhagavad Gita also says this. Go beyond the scripture, go beyond the word, right? Don't get caught up in the snare of the church builder, the meshes that the word create. Mother has said this so many times. Do not make any dogma of any of my teaching. But we end up doing this all the time because that's safe. That's comfortable. Context has changed. Time has changed. What is the core? What is the essence that should still be there, but new forms? Sri Aurobindo is a master at reminding this so many times especially in his writings on Indian culture, go to the spirit, go to the spirit, forms will change with time. That's how we work on this self-will in thought and action. Egoism in the mind. Very difficult, but we have to do if we really want to be worthy of being their children. And then the next part, egoism and its endless disguises. That's his phrase. There are so many disguises egoism come in. And that's the center of all resistance. I've taken few examples, which he says are the most effective disguises. Altruism. I want to do good to the others. I have been blessed with so much. I want to share with others. Can that also be coming from our egoism? That's a question we must ask. Most philanthropy, Sri Aurobindo has said, is coming from a place of egoism, right? So that's a disguise that egoism uses. Also, indifference. This is the indifference of the renunciate, the sannyasi. World is burning, countries are fighting. I am in my saffron red, whatever garb. What do I need to do? Why should I be concerned about it? Is it truly an indifference? Have you really gone to that status of equanimity where nothing shakes you in soul? Or is it because your garb requires you to say these things? Sri Aurobindo is actually quite straightforward in this chapter. This is all from that chapter titled Renunciation. And this is one of the chapters of In Synthesis of Yoga, which I don't remember how many times I've read because it is so beautifully written and it is so direct. It just hits you. It wakes you up. Then Sri Aurobindo gives few other examples. He says, let's say we are striving to walk on the path of karma yoga. Sometimes, and if we have had a touch, a contact, true contact with our inmost being, with our psychic being, that would be our guide, how or what we should do. Let's say what action we should take. People around us may think that, oh, this is still serving her ego. She's saying it that I am doing it for others, or this is the work that is needed. Opinions of men may be there because they may see this as not being guided by your truth. They may see as being guided by your ego. Must read Sri Aurobindo's explanation of this. But this is, in the language of the Gita, the work that must be done. Because since you have had that true contact, you are guided by that truth. What matters is that inner eye. Equanimity is about not being concerned about success and failure, but it's not a passion. What kids today or young people today, I have been trained as an engineer, but I want to go into film acting or film directing. That's where my passion is. We can't judge from outside, but only they can judge whether it is really coming from that truth of their inmost being, or is it something that, it's a moment's passion and tomorrow it may not be there. So, what is the kartavyam karma? Is where Sri Aurobindo says the I within is all, not what the opinions. It may seem like that you are doing an egoistic work. On the other hand, if you are doing something that may seem very altruistic, that may be coming from your ego. So again, the opinion of people will be, oh, look how good this person is. She's doing so much good for the others. But if that's not coming from your inmost truth, that has no value, right? So it's the disguises that egoism takes. So Sri Aurobindo gives the example of, again, Arjun and Krishna, what I was just sharing a little bit a few minutes ago, the egoism and the contrary egoism of strength and its opposite, the egoism of weakness. And he thinks that this is actually virtue, right? I think Anaghaji or somebody had that point, the virtuous act. Not fighting, according to Arjun, was the virtuous thing to do, not killing my relatives. He gives logical arguments to Krishna that this is the right thing, not to lift my bow and arrow. And Shri Krishna, again, in a very humorous way, Sri Aurobindo describes this dialogue that happens between Arjun and Krishna in this chapter. He says, Arjun tells him, pick up your bow and arrow and fight and enjoy the kingdom. How bad of this teacher who lost an opportunity that world would have gotten another sannyasi and, done some really spiritual things, but he forced him to fight. And then he gives the example of Ram also, that what if Ram would have said, oh, Ravan has taken my wife, doesn't matter. I cannot fight against this thing. So let whatever happened to Sita might have, let it be. Would that be the right thing to do? That's the opinion. People may think that did he burnt a whole kingdom? He destroyed a whole kingdom for the sake of one woman? But that was the dharmic thing to do, right? What was the intent? Because they were in touch with their inmost truths. Ram was not doing it just to rescue his wife. Ram was doing it to establish a certain dharma, to tell the world that this kind of thing is not done. It is not acceptable to steal one woman like that. And to also, of course, there are many layers to the story, but literally his purpose was to establish a sattvic collective life, a sattvic order. So this kind of kidnapping and abduction would not be as per the sattvic establishment of the order. So this is one way Sri Aurobindo says. And I want to just end with this because it will take a little longer to expand on this, but I just want to bring it to our consciousness. One of the key ideas from Upanishad, Isha Upanishad, Ten Tyakten Bhunjita, the very first verse, renounce all to enjoy all. So the ultimate formula, if I can use that word, to work on attachment is to practice this inner renunciation so that we can also enjoy all, because then we are not attached to having the actual object in our possession. Mother gives a beautiful example of an artist. For an artist who is evolved in his or her consciousness, when she or he sees some beautiful object in nature or a beautiful painting, the natural instinct of a refined artist temperament is not to possess it, but to know how beautiful it is and to say, the world is richer because this beauty exists, and just leave it there. But the ordinary temperament is to acquire it, purchase it, buy it, right? So if we have renounced inwardly, we can enjoy the beauty. Everyone can enjoy that beauty. But if we have possessed it and kept it in only my locker, it's only I'm just holding on to it, right? Be prepared to leave behind not only that which we stigmatize as evil, but that also which seems to us to be good and yet is not the one good. Because Sri Aurobindo expands on this. Maybe certain things worked for you at a certain point in time and they no longer serve your soul's journey's purpose. Be prepared to leave them behind. Even divine realizations must not be clung to if they are not the divine realization in its utter essentiality and completeness. And for me, the best way to understand this last part is Sri Aurobindo's own spiritual journey. He had the experience of nirvana in 1908. He could have established a dham, a mutt, an ashram, and have thousands and thousands and thousands of disciples, but that's not the path he chose. He felt that there is more beyond this nirvana. He has written about in a letter where he says 6 months complete silence, and then all the colors started to come in. He said, this was my nirvana. All the shades of life started to integrate themselves in my nirvanic experience. That's why he was giving fiery speeches while in the state of nirvana. And then the dynamic divine experience happens in prison, which takes him to a step higher. Then more experiences keep on happening. And finally, we have the supramental manifestation of 1956 through Mother, right? So he was not clinging on to any divine realization because things in his awareness were kept opening up, and he was just following the path. He was letting go. We have another beautiful example of 1920s when mother said, I had created a whole world as per the overmental consciousness. And Sri Aurobindo says, no, that's still overmental. Supermind is beyond. And she says, in a moment, I let the whole overmental creation dissolve. Perfect detachment. She was, we have the accounts of how in this disciple, she said, this is the emanation or this deity or this God. That was all over mental, right? The plane of gods. And then she allowed the whole world to be dissolved because there was still something more. So I'll stop here. And yeah, I don't think I have. Yes, finally, yes. Last thing, Sri Aurobindo's guidance. None of this is going to happen quickly. The overcoming of all attachments must necessarily be difficult and cannot come except as a fruit of long sadhana. Unless there is always grace, unless there is a rapid general growth in the inner spiritual experience, which is the substance of Gita's teaching. So, unless we are receptive as Arjun and we have a Krishna, so that grace can always happen, right? But then Arjun also forgot. So, yes.
Biluji, I wanted to share.
Yes, please, please.
Thank you for this beautiful talk. And one of the I'll say plays which mother has written, Ascent to Truth, the Ascent to Truth. That is what was continuously coming to my mind when you were doing this discussion, because she has covered both the aspects of the egoism as well as letting go the attachments in the 7 stages. And I feel like I should spend time today to read it again. And, it is a very beautiful way which, you tied the Sri Aurobindo's writings, and something for me definitely to, read and work on. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that play. Yes, I should also go back and reread it. You're absolutely right. That is, I don't know why it didn't come to me, that drawing that she did, which is
Yeah.
at the cover, on the cover page of that play.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, it is an ascent to truth. Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it covers a lot of the questions actually which people asked about philanthropy, everything. She has really marvelously, she has put it in a story form for us.
Yes, yes, yes. Very true. Very true. I could have just actually read the play and not done this. There are two just quick things I will say, and if anybody is interested, I can share more about it. Bhagavad Gita lays so much emphasis on samatvam, equality, equality, equality. But still, so if everybody is equal in my eyes, if everything, every circumstance is equal, then why do I need to pick up my bow and arrow and kill? Right? Yet, Sri Krishna tells Arjun, in this state of samatvam, kill, that is, make a choice, right? That choice will have a consequence, even though that action has been given to, offered to the divine. But Arjun is free. But when Arjun goes to the heaven, the people that he had killed are also free of the consequence of the action, right? That was the samatvam, the benefit of the samatvam state. But they had to be killed. That choice had to be made. So this is one part. Even in the unattached samatvam state, action has to be done. Choice has to be made, not from an ego, but from the truth of the divine. In Arjun's case, he had a little easier. Krishna was telling him. In our case, we have to turn more to the Krishna within. Second point about my guru, the Shuddh ahankar or the Shuddh ego or the Shuddh attachment. So when Sahanadi asked Sri Aurobindo a question that some of us were standing and, in that context, somebody said something about Sri Aurobindo's teaching, which he felt very hurt by, that he doesn't understand. He was not necessarily connected to the ashram or part of anybody who we would think of as Sri Aurobindo's devotee, but she felt hurt. And she said that I got angry from what I remember, it's been a while since I read that. So, what should have been my approach? So, Sri Aurobindo addressed that. He said, yes, even though equanimity, equality is needed, state of detachment is needed, and you should not do anything out of hatred or malice or anything, but you should also be protective of the truth that you have seen as true. So, for you, if your guru is the truth, you should have the strength and do it without malice, but speak for the truth that you have seen in your guru's teachings. It's not to undermine any other guru, but it is just to know that as disciples of a guru, this is the truth that I stand by, especially if the other person is saying wild things or without understanding or without knowing. So, yes, so some attachment to the Guru. There is another beautiful essay by Nalini Kant Gupta where he says something about fidelity to the Guru. We open to all teachings, but our tradition has always spoken about that if you really want to reach the divine, then stick with one well that you have dug. If you dig too many wells, you will never get the water. So fidelity to a path, fidelity to a guru is also necessary. So whether we call it attachment or shuddha attachment or whatever, or a state of surrender, all that is, so
Doing
things can be.
Doing that with the knowledge that other paths are also.
Yes, absolutely. Knowing that for my temperament, this is my path. And that's why we have the multiplicity of paths, that for other temperaments, other gurus or other paths would be just as true. And what mother says, having a respectful goodwill towards all. So I know we are beyond and beyond, but this topic is like that. Thank you, Vrindaji and Shruti and Anaghaji and Chitra, everyone. Vandanaji.